Good afternoon, and I guess we're into the evening already now. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever you want to say. It is Paul Zeise, and of course, we are here for what we call the Big Show, although it's kind of a special edition of the Big Show because the Big Show today, we are actually doing sort of a preview of, or what do we call it, a pregame show of the Steelers in Carolina in their final rendition of the preseason of 2026. And so, therefore, we will talk a little bit about the game. Obviously, it starts at 7. We will do what we can do to get you ready for it. And joining me now to help, at least for some of it, is my main man, Chris Carter. And Chris, the question I have for you, because you are the guy that obviously would know such things, is this: what is it that we should be looking for tonight?
A few different things. One, I think in the secondary, Mike Tomlin said he wanted to see the starters play, but David Canales, the Panthers head coach, has said he's not going to play his starters. So will we see Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, Joey Porter Jr. all play? They have sat out the first 2 preseason games. There's been a curiosity from the Steelers coaches, I think, to see these guys in a game environment be able to go all out together, and at least do so for a drive or two to get their cohesion going during a live game. But if like Ted McMillan, Bryce Young, Xavier Legette, none of those guys play, I feel like there wouldn't be the point. And so then the next look at the secondary would be at the guy who I think is really struggling to make the roster right now, and that's Beanie Bishop Jr. Beanie Bishop, I think, has done a fine job. But as Terrell Austin said on Monday, he had a pretty tough hand dealt to him when the team brought in Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, and Brandon Echols, 3 really good veterans that bring experience. Even Brandon Echols is basically now the 4th string corner of the Steelers, but he can play outside and inside. And now Beanie Bishop's a kind of a position when you have Ramsey playing slot and Echols playing slot. Do you need a third guy who's more specifically suited just to play slot corner? So he's going to be a position of interest to watch. The other thing I'm looking at is this offensive line. I asked Mike Tomlin through the first 2 preseason games, the first team offense with the first offensive line only ran 5 times in those games. And I was wondering, will they want to see more of that? And Mike Tomlin didn't give us a straight answer there. But I do think that there's a sense that, hey, if this team wants to run the ball more, they're going to need to find that chemistry with this very young O-line. So I'm looking at the secondary and the O-line, especially early on in this preseason game.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, Chris, you mentioned the secondary, and of course, bringing in Jalen Ramsey, bringing in Darius Slay, doing some of the things they've done. I mean, there's a great question to be asked, and that is, did they make themselves better?
I think they did in the sense of what they're trying to do. Minkah Fitzpatrick was a guy who a lot of people were down on because he wasn't getting interceptions, but he wasn't getting interceptions not because of his lack of talent or anything or falling off. It's because teams are just avoiding him. When you go to sports information systems, they chart how deep of a pass that you're targeted on. They charted Minkah Fitzpatrick to be targeted on just 4 deep passes last year, passes going 20 yards or further down the field. And all 4 of those were incomplete passes. Teams just said, you know what? Fine, Minkah Fitzpatrick, you stay back there. We're not going after you. We're going after all these guys underneath. So I think what the Steelers said to that plan, they said, okay, we can't put $20 million into a safety that's supposed to be a prime playmaker when he's just being avoided. So let's put the $20 million into the position that's going to make the difference, and that's the cornerback spot. And that's where they swapped Fitzpatrick out for Jalen Ramsey, and they're trusting Jalen Ramsey to be a turnover creator or a disruptor that's going to help everyone else get more turnovers as well. I think that's where things could be better for the Steelers, because when I look at Juan Thornhill and Chuck Clark, the 2 guys are going to kind of be tasked with holding down the free safety position next to Deshaun Elliott at strong safety. Both of them seem like capable guys that they can keep a top on a defense. They don't have the playmaker ability that Minkah Fitzpatrick has, but again, if teams are just kind of avoiding throwing the deep ball when everyone's in position, then I think the Steelers should be like, all right, cool. You know what we're going to do is we're going to run man a lot more often. We're going to press you a lot more often. And now you're going to have to hold on to the football a little bit longer. When you're holding on to the football a little bit longer, all of a sudden, TJ Watt, Cam Heyward, Alex Highsmith, those guys, they're going to have more time to get into the backfield, sack the quarterback, and create other problems. So that's what they're trusted to be better. Will it be better? We'll have to find out. Terrell Austin's first 3 years as defensive coordinator have all been top 10 defenses. None of them have been top 5. That's what they want to crack this year.
Well, and I think that's really a really good point. They've spent a lot of money on defense. We've talked a lot about, they've got a number of elite players. Chris, the one thing I'm going to tell you about the defense, and, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but they seem to be very, very shallow. And in terms of, I don't know how deep they are. I don't know how many real injuries that they could probably sustain and maintain a high level of playing. From the standpoint, again, I look sort of behind the starters on the defensive line. I'm not all that excited. I guess Nick Herbig is a decent option outside behind the big two, but inside, I'm not sure what they have. I think their corners, Jalen Ramsey hopefully is who we think he is, but beyond him and Joey Porter and whatever, I don't know, man. I feel like this is a team that is really built for winning this year, but they have to stay healthy.
I think the stars have to stay healthy for sure, but I do think this is actually one of the deeper defenses you've seen. Cole Holcomb looks like he's ready to be the starting linebacker, and he's the third guy at inside linebacker. I think this might be the deepest inside linebacker group that they've had since I've covered them. And I'm talking about back when they had Ryan Shazier and Vince Williams. Granted, they had really didn't have anybody behind them, and that's what they ran into when Ryan Shazier was lost to injury. But I think that when you look at it right now, Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Cole Holcomb, that's a trio of basically starting linebackers who can cover, play the run, go sideline to sideline, and use all forms of athleticism. They're deep there. I do think defensive line could be a question, but I like what I've seen so far. Derek Carman very much looks the part of being a rookie guy that can start in the D line and be an asset, especially against the run. I think Keanu Benton looks good. Cam Heyward will look good, as he always does. I don't expect that to be a problem. And then the question will be, after those guys, can Y.A. Black, a rookie who's looked really good in camp, look good in the regular season? We don't know. He's a 5th-round rookie out of Iowa, but he's massive. And when I watch him so far, basically teams just have to double team him because he's just so big and strong that if you don't, he's just going to push you backwards. So he's going to be good there. I think that Dana Quale is going to be a solid backup interior defensive lineman. So I think they might have a rotation of 5 guys that could be useful in the D line, but we got to see how that plays out. Corner, Brandon Echols, I think, is as good of a backup corner as this team might have had in recent years. I think if you go back to some other years, Brandon Echols might have been good enough to start on some of these defenses where the cornerback position was lacking. But at the same time, you got to see these guys play out. I actually kind of like their depth this year. And that might be one of the assets that I think might work in their favor, is just that they can, as long as they're not losing superstars. Like if Darius Slay goes down at cornerback and Brandon Echols pops in, I don't think they lose a ton there. I think that they lose, I think that they'll lose some, but I think Echols can hold the line. Safety might be one though. Like if Deshaun Elliott goes down, that could be a problem. I don't think that they have another comparable strong safety unless Chuck Clark and Anwan Thornhill are willing to just flop between those two spots. But between inside linebacker, I do think edge rusher could be a problem if Alex Highsmith or Nick Herbig go down, because then you're relying on Jack Sawyer as your next guy off the bench. But between interior defensive line, inside linebacker, and corner, I think that this defense does have some depth to them.
Okay, well, that's good to hear because that was one concern I had for them. The other concern I have for them, Chris, is offensive line depth. In fact, I don't know how anybody could really feel 100%, feel good even about the starting 5 yet, just from the standpoint of we're not sure, what the 2 tackles are going to bring.
Yeah, I mean, I like what I've seen out of Jones and Fautanu in preseason and in training camp. I think that they've both sharpened up a lot, especially when it comes to pass protection, which is kind of funny because pass protection was the biggest thing I was worried about with Broderick Jones, but he's looked good there. He's had better footwork, better hand placement. He looks very comfortable at left tackle. Troy Fautanu looks very good at doing that. We haven't seen them do a whole lot of run blocking though, and that's what I've been wondering. Like, okay, when are we going to see that part of this offensive line? Because that's what they've been trying to build up to being a group that can win in the line of scrimmage when it comes to running the football. So can they do that? I don't know. But when it comes to depth on the offensive line, you are 1,000% correct. Spencer Anderson has been the guy filling in for Isaac Seumalo at left guard during training camp while Seumalo recovered from his injury. And he hasn't looked too great. He's been okay at times, not so okay others. Calvin Anderson, was hurt for a while. He didn't look great. Dylan Cook has been very up and down. He'll have some really impressive moments and some other moments where he's not so impressive. But that's why they went and got Andrus Peat in free agency, just a guy who used to be a first-round pick for the Saints back in 2015, who has plenty of experience. He played left tackle one game, left guard the other, and I think he's going to make this roster now as that extra offensive lineman that Mike Tomlin loves for versatility to help out in different spots. But they have a lot of positions that, like, will Ryan McCullum be healthy to be backup center? Offensive line is definitely going to be thin, and if they sustain a couple injuries there, it could take them off their game. We know that they suffered some injuries last year. Fautanu missed the whole season. Daniels missed pretty much the whole season, and they were able to get by. But this year, you're hoping maybe for once you can have a healthy Steelers offensive line and then see if this group can grow together in its chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, too, is they got to come together. How much have they played together? And again, the two tackles, I think, are a wild card. How about Mason McCormick? What are your thoughts on him?
Mason McCormick, I think, can be. I think he can be a guy that can contribute, but he needs to be more consistent. When I look at him, when he locks in on the run game, he is a force. He's very powerful. He knows how to use his hands, and I like what I see out of him there. But I also think that he can sometimes get a little too overbearing at times, and he can kind of overplay his position and lose leverage or get beat by a wily veteran who can kind of sniff out what he's trying to do. So I like Mason McCormick, but I do think that there's he's one of the bigger questions on this line. I think Zach Frazier's pretty solid at center. Honestly, I want to see Fautanu and Jones just in live action more at their positions, but what's crazy is going into camp, I had the biggest question, like, man, I don't know about Broderick Jones just yet. I got to see him actually do it. I don't know about Fautanu. I barely saw him last year. They're the two offensive linemen I've become the most comfortable watching for the Steelers and saying, like, hey, I think these guys might be good this year because of what they put out there in just their fundamentals, what they're able to do. I even wrote about that for the Post-Gazette this week. Arthur Smith talked about, being brilliant in the basics, and that's what they've been trying to work on with these guys, where I think, I don't know if I'd say brilliant, but I think that they've been very good in their fundamentals in these preseason games and the practices I've watched them closely in, which is a good sign, that's the main thing you want from young guys. Get your fundamentals down, and then you can start, once you master your fundamentals, that's when you can start to stack on more and more skills and be able to become a more complete player.
Right. I mean, I think that's the key to me is, just growth and getting better. I was listening to Ben Roethlisberger's podcast, and, if you can get through, some of the nonsense about drinking beers and, whatever he did for the weekend and all that other stuff, there's actually some really good content in that every week. And one of the things he was talking about was DK Metcalf. And he basically was saying that he's like, he's a beast. He's like a stud. He's like somebody that's going to overwhelm teams physically. And he's somebody that, is like bigger and more physical than anybody that he played with, which, I guess that's up for debate because I think he did play with Hines Ward, if I'm not mistaken. And Hines Ward was pretty physical and everything else. But regardless, the bottom line is he was talking a lot about DK Metcalf and basically saying that if they can give Aaron Rodgers time to throw the ball, that it could be an incredible season in terms of the offense because DK Metcalf is that guy. What are your thoughts on that?
I think DK Metcalf is a guy who's been waiting to break out in the NFL for some years. He just hasn't had the most coordinated passing attack, with the Seahawks to do it. But now with Aaron Rodgers, not that Aaron Rodgers I think is going to light it up crazily, but I do think that Aaron Rodgers is a smart enough quarterback who can notice, like, hey, we know the spots and where to get this guy, so we can maximize his skill set. I do think DK Metcalf is in for having a good year for the Steelers, and he might be able to do it. I think one thing DK Metcalf definitely is he's a true professional. Like, George Pickens was fantastic at going up and getting the football. He was one of the best in the NFL at doing that. It was just a natural skill of his. But DK Metcalf is a guy who has polished so many parts of his game. He's so good at getting out of his routes. He's so good at blocking. He has consistent hands. He makes a lot of these plays. I think that he can get a lot of these basics done for the Steelers when it comes to the wide receiver position, while also being a phenomenal athlete with size and speed to get loose. And whereas I do agree, Hines Ward's the most physical receiver that I've seen in the modern era of the Steelers in the 2000s. But I will say DK Metcalf, you think of size, 6'4", 229, that's uniquely big. And so he's going to be able to bully people in his routes, box them out with his body, and confidently do so. And look, if this guy ends the season with 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, that's going to be huge for the Steelers. They, when you look at the production that they've gotten out of the wide receiver position of late, if he's able to be just a consistent producer who does those types of things, and I don't think this offense is going to only run through him. I think they're going to spread things out pretty well. I think that he can be a very good weapon for the Steelers and open things up for them.
Yeah, I mean, the other guy, I guess, the second receiver or whatever we're going to call. I mean, I know that reading some of the reports from camp and some of the things after he made a catch last week, I mean, there are some people, I think, ready to put Roman Wilson in his gold jacket already. But, again, I'm one of those that I need to see it, you know what I mean? And I need to see it in a regular season against guys that are actually NFL players, and I need to see it consistently before I'm ready to crown somebody. And that's nothing against him. It's nothing against Troy Fautanu. It's nothing against even Broderick Jones.
Absolutely.
I have to see it before I believe it, but you have actually watched a lot more of Roman Wilson than me. Do you feel he's a guy that's ready to take that next step?
I think he's ready to go out there and prove who he is in the first place. Taking the next step would mean he took a first step, and his first step I don't think he's really taken yet. His first step, he was injured last year. He's done some good things in camp. The first week and a half or so at camp, he was barely noticeable, and I was starting to be like, that's not a good sign if I'm not noticing you in practice when they're trying to include you a whole lot. But then going into that second week, there was a catch he made over Joey Porter Jr., and I was like, oh, okay, there's something there. And then after that, it was just like his confidence grew, and he started building. And every practice, I noticed him make another impressive play. And in these first 2 preseason games, he's done well and just getting open, making the catch, getting yards after the catch. Those are good signs for Roman Wilson. Now, is he ready to be wide receiver 2? That could be a stretch right there. But I do think that he's ready to be a contributor in the offense if Calvin Austin's healthy, and both those guys could be on the field at the same time. Both of these guys ran 40-yard dash times when they came out into the NFL below a 4.4. So they have really good NFL speed to get behind you as a defense, but also to stretch the field if they're running horizontally. And if you don't get inside leverage on them and they get to step on you, Aaron Rodgers can say, quick flip right here, 4-yard pass over the middle. And now if they're ahead of you, they're taking off with that sub 4.4 speed. And that's where I think Roman Wilson could be really dangerous for the Steelers if he starts to put things together. But I'm not even know what it means ready to crown him or anyone yet that's been unproven. But I do think there's reasonable there's reasonable chances here, or reasonable causes here, arguments here for people to be excited for Roman Wilson and a few other people to step up this season.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I think he's a guy that people are really going to start counting, need to count on. The Steelers are going to count on, right? Just from the standpoint of you got to figure they need a second option, and he's their second option. Another guy that's a second option that you've seen a lot more than most because you've been at camp all the time and everything else. Jonnu Smith. Ben Roethlisberger on his podcast said that Mike Tomlin didn't want to rave about Jonnu Smith, but he kind of made it very clear that this dude is a dude. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I like Jonnu Smith's ability to get open in different spots. He spent the last week and a half or so of training camp resting and recovering, so we didn't get to see him really do much towards the end. But the things I saw from him is a guy that's still a polished route runner who he's going to be a tough matchup because he's bigger. So if you try to put a smaller corner on him, he'll bully them. But he's also quick. So if you try to put a bigger guy on him and they're not fast and quick enough, he can get loose on him. So he's going to be a unique weapon. That's why I also think that it's going to be I don't know if the Steelers go and they get a big name wide receiver here moving forward because they're not going to I think there's the person who plays wide receiver 2 for the Steelers this year, or if it's a thing by committee between Wilson and Calvin Austin, they're going to be the primary secondary option, but also the drop off might be very steep between the guy who plays wide receiver 2 a lot and the guy who plays wide receiver 3 a lot, because they're going to use a lot of these 12 personnel formations. And for those who don't know, 12 personnel formations is just in the way of saying 2 tight ends are on the field with one receiver or one running back and 2 receivers. But I look at this opportunity, Paul, and I think, man, there's a chance for the Steelers. If Aaron Rodgers is protected, he could spread the ball around to some playmakers and where they cross some mismatches and some opportunities. I think that's what the Steelers are hoping for with Jonnu Smith, is that while Pat Frymuth's out there and you're worried about DK Metcalf and you're worried about the speed of another one of the receivers, then you got to worry about this guy who can cut you up in the middle part of the field, get open, and get yards after the catch.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing. Is one concern I have, obviously. You have Mount Washington, but the other 3 tight ends are not really good blockers. So that's going to be an interesting thing, is how do you run the football effectively without tipping your hand by putting Washington out there. That's something I think is going to be very interesting to see. But I think the other thing is a very, very good question is, can Jaylen Warren take go from one seat, to where he's the backup to now he's the guy. How is he going to handle that?
I think that's a good question. Jaylen Warren, I think, is ready as far as a running back perspective from the basic things that are asked of him. Running the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield, cutting to the open lane and attacking. But he has to protect the football, and that's something that he didn't do a few times last year, and that really bugged the Steelers. And meanwhile, I've seen Caleb Johnson. I asked about him in the spring, hey, what do you do to kind of simulate, when you can't practice with contact because you are a big power runner? And Caleb Johnson says, well, all through rookie camp and mini camp and OTAs and everything, he's been telling the defense to punch the ball out of his arms, no matter where he's at. If he's getting up, if he's walking around, if he's running out of bounds after a play, punch the ball out. And he said, I challenge them to try to knock the ball out of my hands. And I haven't seen them do it in rookie camp, OTAs, mini camp, or training camp. He does drop passes, but when it comes to possessing the football, I think Caleb Johnson protects the ball well. That could be the big thing, that if Jaylen Warren doesn't protect the ball well enough this year, that could be what gets Caleb Johnson some more shots. But I think Jaylen Warren can get a lot of the basics done for you, and he's a fast guy that can make plays. I think the Steelers want to see that in action before they just throw Caleb Johnson in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is it's going to be very interesting, honestly, Chris, because a lot of people spent last year or the year before, complaining about Najee Harris, but there's a part of me that thinks they're going to miss him a little bit just because he was a guy who showed up every week, ran hard, and can do multiple things.
I mean, that's the thing. Najee Harris, I know that a lot of people were down on him because he wasn't a big playmaker when it comes to the long run. He wasn't a guy who, always, made the biggest splash, and you saw long. His longest run was 36 yards in his career with the Steelers. But here's the thing, like you said, the consistency. That man had over 1,000 rushing yards in each and every season. He is the only player in the NFL to get 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons, let alone 4 straight seasons during that time. That comes from consistency, durability. He played and started in all 17 games for 4 straight years. And in all those games, out of the 1,277 times that he touched the ball, he fumbled 5 times. He lost, and that is insane when you look at the when you look at the number of touches and the ball security he brings to the table, that's what they really want out of Caleb Johnson. Yes, the vision, the explosion, the playmaking, yes, but protect the football. We've seen many games and seasons ruined when a player doesn't protect a football, and then all of a sudden a good drive that was setting up for a win gets lost because people lose their because guys can't protect the football.
Right. Well, if you can't do that, you can't do that. I wrote a column yesterday sort of about the contrast in quarterbacks in the AFC North, especially with Joe Flacco now. The guy in Cleveland. You've got two 40-somethings, sort of, the last remnants of this last era of quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And then you've got two of the young guns, obviously, that are completely different players, but, both of them are considered. I think most people consider the four best quarterbacks in the league to be Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Mahomes, and Burrow. There's some, squabbles here and there, but for the most part, I think if you polled 100 experts, those would be the four that would probably get the most votes as the top guys. And so you've got two young guns who are, superstars. One who's already actually been to a Super Bowl, the other who's won, 2 or 3 MVPs or whatever he's won.
Yep.
And then you've got two 40-somethings who have Super Bowl rings. And, I know that there's this discussion that maybe Aaron Rodgers has got one more year in him after this.
Yeah.
But it really kind of feels like for both him and Flacco, this might be it.
I wouldn't be shocked if it was.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. I mean, I'm just saying it's kind of interesting if you look at the difference between, the four quarterbacks.
No, yeah, I think you could very well see that, but it is interesting seeing the difference because even in Burrow and Jackson, they're two different styles of quarterbacks, right? Jackson will use his legs a lot to create opportunities for everyone else and then throw pretty accurately most of the time. Joe Burrow is a more in the pocket, like he'll use his legs when he has to, but he's very good at finding his guys and getting the ball there. And I think he has the best receiver duo in the NFL, so that also helps him out a lot there. But yeah, for sure, Joe Burrow led the NFL in completions, passing attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns last year. That's a very good sign for him, and I think that's great. Meanwhile, the Steelers, they're just trying to find it. It's crazy because the Steelers, throughout all that, while Joe Burrow is a potential MVP candidate and Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate, and those teams are doing it, the Steelers are still hanging in there with who they have and finding ways to get winning seasons, to get into the playoffs. That's where I think that the Steelers can kind of be unique at times. Just while all these superstars quarterbacks are elsewhere, they're just kind of like, where there's a will, there's a way. And Paul, look at the Steelers have this is now the 5th straight year where they've had a new quarterback starting at the start of the season. Ben Roethlisberger in 2021, Mitch Trubisky 2022, Kenny Pickett 2023, Justin Fields 2024, and Aaron Rodgers 2025. So that's 5 straight years of new quarterbacks, and they still found a way to stay relevant. I do think that's interesting. I also think these Bengals and Ravens teams that are as they're currently assembled need to strike now, because if they don't, certain guys will have to get paid, certain guys will age out, and then you're going to have to rebuild parts of your core, and that's going to be a rough spot.
Do you think the Bengals did anything at all to upgrade their defense enough and their offensive line enough to fix what sort of ailed them last year?
No, I actually think they did nowhere near enough on either side. I watched a bit of that Commanders Bengals preseason game, and look, Joe Burrow was able to get 2 touchdowns on the board, but he was running for his life, and the defense could not stop anybody. I think that the Bengals have put themselves in a corner that is going to make their situation look a lot worse moving forward when we get to see more of this defense, more of this offensive line. You hope Joe Burrow doesn't get injured, but when you don't do stuff long enough, well, eventually you put your quarterback at risk, and he's already missed basically 2 seasons because of that. So I find the AFC North very interesting, but I also think that there's a strike while the iron is hot situation for both Burrow and Jackson and their teams, because if they don't, I think the Steelers will be around the corner to fix things up. I also think other teams will start to catch up as well, and then you're going to be in a bit of a pickle.
Are you buying the Browns at all?
No, I'm buying zero part of the Browns. If you could give me the Browns, I still would not take them. They're not. their situation. Paul, like, the saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. What the Browns are like, okay, hear me out. What if we have six quarterbacks? Then do we have one? That's kind of what they did here. And I'm just like, what are you doing? And like, I actually don't, I get Joe Flacco being named the starter. I get it because I don't think Shador is ready for the full thing yet there. Not saying he can't get there. I like Shador Sanders in college. I think that he has potential. But I also think he still has a ways to grow. And I think Joe Flacco will help you kind of just have a steady presence back there, keep things alive, and make things happen. But I'm not a Dylan Gabriel believer. I think that was a rough pick by them. And I'm eager to see what they kind of do here. Because they traded down in the draft to skip up on Travis Hunter and pick up an extra first-round pick next year. They took Mason Graham. I want to see, can Mason Graham be that guy on the interior to help free things up for Myles Garrett? Just don't know if that's going to happen.
No, and the biggest thing with the Browns is they're the Browns. But I laughed when you said six quarterbacks, but you're correct. I mean, they haven't cut Snoop Dogg, whatever his name is, Snoop Dogg. I haven't cut him yet, right?
Snoop Dogg.
Isn't that what they call him? Isn't that his nickname or something like that?
Snoop Huntley.
Snoop Huntley. I mean, that's my point. They haven't really cut him.
For shizzle my nizzle.
Right?
No, they haven't cut him. And you're right, but that's the thing. I mean, Kenny Pickett is still there. So they got Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, who we saw him. There was videos of him like trying to do his rehab. So Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Shador Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, and Snoop Huntley. That's six quarterbacks. That's a lot to go down. And somebody's got to get cut here. Like if Joe Flacco's starting and you got two guys on a rookie contract, that makes me look at Kenny Pickett and be like, buddy, you in danger. Like yeah. There's some serious questions there. So I don't know what's going on in Cleveland, man. They look like a complete mess, and I don't know what's going to change about them for the good for this season.
Well, I'm assuming they'll cut Snoop at some point.
Absolutely.
And then Deshaun Watson,
IR.
They'll put him on IR or whatever, and so they'll keep him around. But you're right; they're not going to keep the other four guys unless they make this decision, which this would be the Browns' of the Browns' decisions, and that would be they keep Flacco and Pickett and one of the two rookies, and they put the other rookie on the practice squad, which, I mean, that would be the Browns' decision of the Browns'
decision of all time.
Right?
My goodness. Oh, my goodness.
I mean, I'm just saying that's what I could see happening, honestly.
The way the Pirates make me shake my head at baseball is how the Browns make me shake my head at football.
Well, we had this discussion on this. I forget who I had on, and they were talking about, is it harder to be a Browns fan or a Pirates fan? And I was like, well, the one thing I will say is, like, the Browns have a few times mixed in a few 9-7s or whatever, and they have actually won a playoff game in the last, 4 or 5 years. And I mean, and because of the salary cap, they at least theoretically have some hope,
right?
But they're equally run badly run organizations. And so to me, it's one of those things where it's a wash. I think I would probably say it's a little tougher being a Pirates fan, because even the one of the things about it is you don't deal with, well, this guy's got 3 plate appearances to get $180,000 bonus, so we're going to cut him.
Right.
Like they do here with the Pirates. Just a couple more minutes with you, Chris. I'll let you go. I know the game begins at 7, and you want to get set up and get all ready to start charting and noting and all the other stuff that you do. You look at the Steelers, obviously, against the Panthers, just sort of to reiterate, because our audience has grown. And by the way, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's. Tell Archie I said hello when you get there. Chris, we talked about it right at the top.
Yeah.
But you have a few things that you will be looking. By the way, Chris breaks down film. He does the Locked On podcast where he really gets into all the X's and O's and ins and outs and everything else about the Steelers. So with What are those things again that you were going to be looking for tonight?
I'm looking for the run game to show some chemistry. I want to see if they charge the run game to go out there and actually run the football a little bit. I asked Arthur Smith at the top of the week, hey, what's the strategy between not trying to run the ball early on? And the way he said it, he was like, hey, we don't want to show all the things we have. And when he mentioned it, and I talked to guys like Troy Fautanu and Broderick Jones, they mentioned like, hey, you notice all the runs? We're running a lot of wide zone. And whereas we like wide zone, that we have movers. Like every one of those offensive linemen can pull and hit in space. The Steelers might have one of the more athletic offensive lines in the NFL when it comes to where they can run and move and hit in space, and they want to use that to their advantage. And I think they should use that to their advantage. I think that's certainly an asset that can keep defenses guessing when you're pulling and you're hitting, and you could catch guys and get good leverage and create better seams for your backs. I think that's what the Steelers have been kind of holding on to. But in this preseason game, I want to see what don't they hold on to? What do they say? Hey, you know what? We're gonna bring this out here. We're gonna show you that we can be a power running football team. And if they do that, that'd be really interesting to see. I'm also interested to see, what happens to the secondary. Do they start the starters, even though the Panthers have said they're going to start their backups? And also, who about some of these backups that play? How does Beanie Bishop look? Because I think his roster spot is in question right now. So I'll be interested to see that and how that rotation works. But yeah, a few things there, and I want to see the continued growth of guys like Roman Wilson. Can he continue to put together what's been a good preseason for him? Like you said, I don't think that he is necessarily the future number 2 wide receiver right now. He's not going to turn that into that this season, but this is a year where he can get himself set up so that next year they do talk about him like that. And I want to see like how he does as more teams try to adapt to the things that he does.
What are your thoughts about Aaron Rodgers playing 0 snaps in the preseason?
I think Aaron Rodgers is a guy that's a rare exception to that because of how cerebral he is as the quarterback. I think that, if he comes out and he throws 2 interceptions and they lose to the Jets, a lot of people are going to be pointing to this preseason and saying, see, this is why you should have been practicing more. But they feel confident that Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to go out there and just turn it on. And because he's been working on it. And listen, Aaron Rodgers is a guy that reads defenses. He's one of the best processors of the field that I've studied as a quarterback next to Tom Brady. And if he's out there, he has the lowest interception percentage of any player if any quarterback in NFL history. So, and he's the highest passer rating. The man is efficient. I do think that plays into Aaron Rodgers' hands a little bit with this offense. They won't be a pass happy offense, but I do think Aaron Rodgers, has kind of earned the stripes to say, hey, you don't need to see me in preseason against these vanilla offenses. Let's just keep working on these things in training camp and at the facility. And then week 1, he'll be ready, but he has to be ready. If he's not ready, then everyone's going to be looking around like, why weren't they doing this for months on end?
Everybody was concerned about how he'd fit in, team chemistry. He's a diva. He's all this other stuff. I have not observed any of that at all from him. In fact, every time he speaks, he sounds like the leader of the clubhouse. He sounds like a guy who's trying to get to know his teammates and really trying to, fit in. And he seems like he's a guy that really understands the history of the Steelers. I mean, am I wrong here?
You're not. And I'll say this because, there were things that Aaron Rodgers said or did that I was kind of I didn't think was, very flattering. The infamous clip of him kind of shrugging off or kind of scoffing at what was his face? Robert Saleh on the sidelines. And then the next day, Robert Saleh getting fired. Like there was a whole lot of stuff behind that I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But I think one thing to remind yourself is that the Steelers are not the Jets. They set a different stage. It kind of sets up guys to do different things. And I think that's where there's some excitement for the Steelers legitimately that Aaron Rodgers won't be this diva character. He will just be and he's even said it. He's happy to just be part of the team, part of the guys. Will that hold up over time? We will have to find that out. But I think that right now, I mean, he deserves credit for kind of being just a good teammate across the board. And as a person who's wondering about this, I do think that Aaron Rodgers has put himself in a good spot. He says he wants to be part of the guys. He's made himself part of the guys. Now, will that maintain when the team lose a couple games this year? We'll find out. But at least right now, he's saying the right things. And as a person who asked some question, I thought I'd get some smug answers. I haven't once gotten smug answer. He's been very detailed with how he responds. So kudos to him. So, you may still have other opinions of him elsewhere from other things that he's said and done in the public eye. But as far as how I try to give people the benefit of the doubt with my interactions. Say I'm going to judge them off of how we interact and how I see with what they do here and in person. I've seen him be a good teammate. I've seen him be courteous. I'm intrigued to see how this year goes on with him as the quarterback.
Last one, and then I will let you go. There is another team that's going to be on the field tonight with the Steelers, and that would be Carolina. Is there anything interesting about the Panthers that people should watch out for? I was trying to look at their roster. I didn't really see many, if any, former Pitt players or anybody that of interest. I know that their starters apparently are not even going to play. I started looking at their backups, and I have no idea who most of these guys are. Is there anything about the Panthers we should be watching?
Yeah, I'd be intrigued to see if their backups do indeed all play, or if some of them get a break. Now, you did miss one, Patrick Jones, former Pitt guy. He's
yes.
there. Yeah, he's a big time edge rusher.
Yeah, I did see him.
I think he's been interesting, but yeah, they might bench him too, Paul. Like I don't know if that's going to be that's going to be too exciting by itself. But hey, if Bryce Young doesn't play, guess what? That means Andy Dalton's in, and Andy Dalton certainly knows the Steelers. Hunter Renfrow might get in there a little bit. He's been in the secondary part of the line. I'd like to see some of these guys like J.C. Horn. I don't know if he's healthy enough to play, but there's certainly some names there to look at. If they play some of these younger offensive linemen like Ike McQuonu, will he get a chance to play a little bit? But yeah, this is like they do not have the depth that excites you when you look at some of these guys that are coming up on their roster right now. A lot of their starters are just very young guys. So maybe some of the starters are left in there. If Chuba Hubbard's in there at running back, that could be interesting. If Patrick Jones is in there, if some of these other guys at these different positions, Mo Rig at strong safety. I'm intrigued to see that. But the Panthers, Steelers, they're a preseason tradition at this point. I'll be intrigued if they do play some of these starters, at least on offense, so the Steelers can get a good look at their secondary.
Yeah, I'd be honest with you. I feel like it's going to be a really long year in Charlotte for football fans. I don't think this is a very good football team. They're young, like you said, and maybe they'll get better. I don't know how, what else I really don't know a whole lot of, ways to judge their coach. But to me, just not a whole lot to get excited about with the Panthers. So, Chris, thank you so much for jumping on, for hanging on here, and for breaking it down like all you do always. And enjoy the game, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. That is Chris Carter. And, of course, Chris Carter, you can read his stuff at the Post-Gazette. You can, talk to him about or you can listen to him and all the other stuff. He does a great job really breaking it down and breaking down film, breaking down, what he sees from the Steelers, all that other stuff. So he's a guy that really, when he talks about stuff, it's important to note that he usually knows what he's not usually, always knows what he's talking about. And so I think that's always good stuff, really, to be honest. We are counting down for you to get ready for the game. The game is on at 7:00, so hopefully, you'll be able to flip over right from here and get to the Steeler game. Again, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson Street. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday. Home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. So get down to Archie's and have a good time and tell Archie I sent you. By the way, FanDuel is another one of our partners. And if you're one of these so inclined to bet preseason games, the Steelers are actually favored in this game by 6. On FanDuel, by the way, you can go right on the app and you can bet a bunch of different ways. And also, the over-under is 34.5. I'll be honest with you. I think 34.5 is way too high. I think when you look at the Steelers, they might score, 20 points or something, 24 points maybe. I think the Carolina Panthers, given what they have in their quarterback situation right now and the fact that they're not going to play their starters, I mean, I think they could struggle to score a touchdown, to be honest. And so 34.5 means basically, the Steelers would have to score probably 34, 32, 31, 32 points themselves. I don't know that I see that. Of course, I don't bet on preseason games because I have zero idea what's going to happen. I don't know how anyone can. I'm just trying to take a guess for you. So go on FanDuel, and if you want to go and make a bet, you have the opportunity. Again, the line is 6, and the line is also 34.5. Just to sort of recap a little bit before we get you out of here, the Steelers will play the Panthers at the top of the hour, 7 o'clock. Game is on the NFL Network. I think there is maybe KDK locally. You can watch it. And of course, it's a preseason game, so I don't get all that excited about it. Mike Tomlin has basically made it pretty clear that anybody that you really want to watch is not going to play tonight. There might be a couple of guys that get a series that maybe didn't play in the last 2 games, but for the most part, you're not going to see Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to see DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey. You're not going to see TJ Watt, none of them. So, and then Carolina, who stinks anyway, they basically have said they're not playing any of their starters on offense, and they'll play, a few of their starters sparingly on defense. So good luck trying to figure something out of this game. But there are some really important things, as Chris Carter said. I think number one is they've got to figure out how to establish the running game. They're going to play their offensive line. They're going to play their running backs. So they've got to figure that out. Number two, I think the other thing about it is Caleb Johnson just got to continue to get better, get sort of up to speed to the NFL game. This is a very, very big night for Beanie Bishop. Very big night for Beanie Bishop. I mean, you want to talk about a guy who last year, remember, he had at least, 4 or 5 times it felt like the ball bounced off someone's head or someone's chest and right to him for an interception. He was sort of like, well, look at this guy. I mean, it's a diamond in the rough. And then he sort of woke up and remembered he was Beanie Bishop. He hasn't had a great summer, hasn't had a great, since camp. And also, a big part of it is they went out and signed guys at the position that he plays. That's a big thing about the NFL. It's always really important. You can be good, but if they go out and sign guys at your position, well, guess what? You're probably not going to play very much. So, to me, that's where we're at with him. Jalen Ramsey was brought here. Darius Slay was brought here. I mean, at the end of the day, they brought in, 3 or 4 secondary guys. There's not a lot of space for somebody like Beanie Bishop, who probably is at the bottom end of the depth chart. He might make the team as the last corner, but I don't know. I really think he's got to have a good night. Although I will say, I think one of the most interesting things always to me is you listen to these coaches talk. I mean, what happens during the week in the preseason usually is more important than what happens in the games. Very few guys make the team or, get cut based on, what they do in 1 or 2 preseason games. Obviously, it's good film. It's good film to see against other teams, but I think most coaches understand, and even most players understand, that the reality is you're going against vanilla offenses and vanilla defenses. You're not going against game plans. You're for the most part, you're probably not going against a team full of starting players. There's just a lot of things that don't really show up when it comes to the preseason, and that's one of them. I think, during the week, every rep they see during practice, 11 on 11, 7 on 7, going through drills, that's where you probably make the team or get cut. But there are some guys, and I'm assuming that Beanie Bishop is in the mix with 1 or 2 other guys that, hey, these are the last 3 guys. Maybe we're only taking 1 of them. And, that's where stuff like, can he play special teams, come into play. That's where those kinds of things happen. So, to me, I feel like it's important to note it's really important to note that, you go through these things and you watch these games and you understand that this last preseason game is theoretically for these guys at the end of the roster. And you hope that maybe, just maybe, a couple of them will shine and everything else. But I'll tell you, I think a lot of the decision has already been made. I mean, first of all, a team like the Steelers, think about how many positions really are open. I mean, you start counting, there's not that many positions that were open to start training camp, much less, now at the end. I think that there's a couple of guys that they brought here or they signed or they drafted or whatever that, maybe are going to fight for a spot. But I just don't think that it's really in a position right now where there's that many people fighting for their job. And I think that's where we're at, really. So I feel like, you're going to enjoy the game. Mason Rudolph, I think, will start. You'll see Skylar Thompson again. We'll see Caleb Johnson again. I think we'll see all the offensive linemen, but for the most part, that's really all you're going to see. So enjoy the game. And until we do it again, which I think might be tomorrow or Monday, we'll see. Enjoy your evening. And, of course, we'll talk about it all the next time we get together. All right, that should be pretty much the end.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.